Hey, Joe Gilder here from Home Studio Corner. I want to take a couple minutes to show you this new plugin bundle that I've been using from PreSonus. But if you are the kind of person who wants to know everything about everything, just go ahead and skip this video and move on. This is going to be more the idiot's guide to this bundle of plugins. What bundle am I talking about? The PreSonus Fat Channel Complete Collection, Volume 1. So if you're familiar with PreSonus Studio One, or the Studio Live Series 3 mixer like this 24 channel that I have sitting in front of me, then you know they've had a fat channel in their software in Studio One for quite some time. And they've incorporated that into the mixers as well, so you have essentially the same types of effects on both. So let me just show you real quickly what I'm talking about. When you get Studio One Professional, for example, and you open up the fat channel, you get a couple of more analog style plugins right out of the gate. You get a couple of compressors and a couple of different EQs. That's the same for the mixer. So this mixer has, on my mixer that's sitting in front of me, I can pull up this exact same EQ, this exact same compressor. So that's useful in a live scenario, or if I'm doing like a live stream where I want to sing into the microphone but then have like an 1176 style compressor on my voice for that stream to YouTube. I can do that without having to open up Studio One and run it through plugins. It's on the mixer itself. So this fat channel collection that they have is basically more models to insert into the fat channel, and it works on both the Studio Live mixer and also the Studio One recording software. So now that I own this complete bundle, I can load it up in my sessions in Studio One, and I can also load it up on my mixer. I'm going to show it to you today in Studio One because that's just easier to demonstrate, but it'll be the same for the mixer as well as Studio One if you want to put it on both, if you happen to have both. Now, quick, super obvious disclaimer, PreSonus gave me this bundle for free in exchange for me doing a video about it and using it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Man, Joe is so evil. How dare he accept something like this? It tarnishes his entire reputation. No, it doesn't. I've been using PreSonus gear for years. They've given me a lot of gear over the years in exchange for making videos about it. The catch, of course, is if their gear was lame, I wouldn't use it. And I don't talk about it too much because I'm more focused on teaching you how to use whatever gear you have to get great sounds. But I do use certain pieces of gear, and PreSonus is a big part of my studio, and I love them and they love me, and it's all sweet and happy. But if that bothers you, that they gave this to me, sorry, move on to another video. But I'm going to give you my honest opinion, and I'm probably not going to do a type of review that they really want me to do because I don't go through and learn everything there is to know about every single aspect of every plugin. Quite the contrary, actually. So I got this plugin bundle a few months ago, and I was mixing an album record for a client, and I decided to use that album to put the plugins through their paces. So I installed them and just started mixing and pulled them up and used them as I saw fit. And so originally, when you have Studio One Pro, these top 3 compressors are the compressors available to you. A standard compressor that just looks like a regular stock compressor, a tube compressor, that's a little LA2A looking, and then a FET compressor. So we've all seen compressors like these. You can get so much mileage out of just those 3. I've mixed many a song using just those, right? Well, everything below the FET is what's included with this bundle. So let me just go through real quickly and let you see them. I don't use all of these. I use really just like 2 pretty regularly. The rest I tried. I either couldn't figure it out or I just didn't find it to be that engaging, so I didn't use it. That's one thing. You need to know that you have permission to not use everything. I'm big on telling people don't buy tons and tons of plugins because you don't want to sit there every time you need a compressor and go through a list of 50 compressors and have to spend 15 minutes coming up with which compressor to use. That's not a great use of your time. If you want to have a lot of plugins, go for it. God be with you. But I like to have as few choices as possible. So even though I have this many in front of me, there are like 2 that I found that I love, in addition to this FET and tube one that I use. So maybe 4, and that's it. I ignore the rest. You don't have to, but that's the way I work, and I feel completely fine with that. They're still worth it to me. All right, Britcomp. This looks like a typical bus compressor that you've seen on really fancy consoles. Incidentally, I had a dream last night. Or 2 nights ago, where I had spent all this money on this studio, had a giant, 64 channel mixer and all this space, and I was thinking, oh, what have I done? I was thinking, this is a home studio. Why do I have this giant, $200,000 mixer here? So anyway, I don't have a giant $200,000 mixer, but I do have a compressor here that sounds pretty nice. This actually is one that I used on this mix. So this is my mix bus. As you can see, I use this compressor here, and it sounds kind of nice. This is that song Homemade Prison that I released a couple of days ago.
Or have I just imprisoned myself? I built it all for myself. I built it all by myself.
Nothing crazy. Ooh, nice reverse. Nothing crazy there. Just a little compression, but it does that thing that these compressors do where the low, I hear it as with just a little bit of compression, the low end has just a tightness and a roundness and a bigness to it that's not quite there before. And while you certainly can just use some sort of stock compressor on your mix bus, and you can get decent sounds that way, something about these is something other than just what the compressor is doing. I can't quite get that sound with a stock compressor. Is it crucial? Is it vital? No, but it is something that's kind of nice. Classic Comp. This is another one I fell in love with. And so I approached these plugins from really a complete noob standpoint, kind of an idiot's approach to the plugins, because I don't know a lot of the fancy hardware. I recognize this one, right? And this one from like studios and having worked on a few. And this one, of course, looks pretty familiar. The rest of these, I think this one I recognized, but the rest of these I had never seen before. I mean, I'd maybe seen a picture of them, but you say, hey, what's that modeled after? I don't know. You can take some guesses based off of the name they used. But I legitimately this is a PreSonus. This is just like one of theirs, as is this one. But the rest are modeled after old, cool, classic analog equipment. This one in particular, I had no clue. I looked it up later and found out what it was, because I was curious how this part of it worked, the recovery or release feature. But I didn't care. I wasn't looking for, okay, I'm going to find this brand that I know is a really good compressor and then use it. I went through, literally, I was mixing drums, and I pulled up this compressor, turned it on, set it up, and said, oh, I like that sound. And then I moved to another one and set it up really quickly and said, okay, this one sounds pretty cool. I'm going to stick with it. So this compressor is interesting. It doesn't have an attack control. And to my ear, it sounds like it's got a pretty fast attack time. And it's fairly aggressive. And the release here works kind of funny. There's these two automatic settings that I don't really know what they do. So I kind of flip back and forth between a 100 millisecond release and this A1 and A2. Honestly, don't know what they do. But I do know that I have this one on, I think it's on my drum bus. I've been using it a lot on my drum bus lately. Let's see what, yep, there it is. Let's take a listen. Let me find a spot where the drums are really rocking out and let you hear that thing in action. I'll start it without the plug-in on, then I'll click it on. Is that an unfair comparison because it adds volume? Yep, absolutely is. But let me see if I can bring it down just for a second to give it a little more. Even volume before and after does help with this. Let's do that again. Just makes the overall kit feel a little more like what I'm expected to hear out of a compressor. It's a little snappier. It's got some punch. It's not over the top. I found this compressor, even at just 1 to 3 dB of gain reduction, sounds really cool. Another place where I've used this one a lot is on vocal. It sounds good on a lot of stuff. Really like it on vocal. You can hear it here. If I solo my lead vocal here, there's a couple of doubles in here as well, all going through this compressor.
I built it all for myself. I built it all by myself, my homemade prison.
Pretty awesome. Here it is without compression.
I built it all for myself. I built it all by myself.
Just in your face. It's still got some warmth to it. It's just very aggressive, but it doesn't sound crazy compressed. But you saw it was getting up here in the 10 or so dB of gain reduction. I love to crush vocals, especially when they're belted like that. And that compressor just handled it super, super well. So let me just go through a few others here. That compressor I've used all over the place. This one I haven't used almost at all. I just didn't really connect with it. This one reminds me of an 1176. I'm assuming it's similar, but not, or I'm sorry, of an LA2A. But it does have an attack and release setting. I've used it a couple of times, but the whole gain reduction, gain knob approach, simple though it is, I tend to want a little more control, so I don't use those a lot. This one obviously just has the input, threshold, time constant. There are people out there who have been using the actual, whatever this is modeled after, FC gives you a hint, 670 gives you a bigger hint. I've just not used one. And I started using it, I just didn't quite understand what the time constant's doing. Obviously, more input gain, more threshold, more compression, but the time constant part I didn't quite get, so I don't use it. And I know you may think that's the dumbest thing ever. I should probably learn it, but I found compressors that gave me the sounds that I wanted. This is modeled after some of the PreSonus compressors, hardware compressors. And then this one, I've used some of the older blue tube gear before, and this sounds really nice as well. You've got attack release settings. It's more traditional. A lot of these compressors don't give you all the controls you're used to having. This is one of the ones that does. It gives you makeup gain, ratio, threshold, attack, and release. And then even you can mess around with this, which I haven't done much with. I just leave it on manual. So if I do it on the entire mix, just to give you an idea of what it sounds like.
I built it up for myself.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything crazy cool to me, but this one allows you to get a little more, if you really like going slow attack, fast release or something, and you want to have some control over both. This one's nice, and it gives you a little bit different sound than what you get out of, say, a standard stock compressor. And then VT1 comp, this is another modeled after some sort of PreSonus piece of hardware. These I haven't found. They sound kind of just normal. I haven't done much with. All right, let's move on to EQs. The EQ list that you have available to you is, let me show you the ones that come with it. So stock with Studio One Pro, you get this kind of basic four-band EQ, which I don't use much. I just use the Pro EQ plugin instead of that one. You get this one, which is called the passive EQ, which looks familiar to one of those famous EQs that has a low-end boost attenuation, a high-end boost and attenuator. It just has a really unique sound. There's some crazy filter stuff that happens here. If I need something to have more low-end, and there's not really a lot of low-end there, this has a way of seemingly creating some low-end on things like kick drum, or even just a drum bus in general, sometimes on a whole mix. That can be kind of cool. Obviously, it can be very over the top too. Let me show it to you on this mix here.
I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself. My homemade prison.
And that's too much low end, but you can hear it's adding a lot of beef down there.
I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself.
If you're on bigger speakers, you can hear that. There's a lot of stuff down there. Now, I'm not a super big expert on this one, but I've started to use it more and more since having it here, and I feel like it does have a place. I don't use it on everything or in every mix even, but it's there. And again, this is not included in the bundle. That's just included in Studio One Pro. And then this one, I use this EQ all the time. It gives me plenty of options, but it's still somewhat limited in what it can do. Love this EQ. I probably use it the most of any of them. Now, for the ones that came with this bundle, this is the one that I use the most of those. It's a 3-band EQ, but it's actually really powerful. Now, I'm I'm a proponent of EQs sounding good, but I also am a bigger proponent of it functioning well. And I like to be able to do a lot of different things. So I like to have a lot of frequencies available, which this does. It goes from 50 hertz up to 400 hertz just on the low band. And then I can turn it from being just a regular bell-shaped curve to a shelf with a click of this button. So both the low frequencies and the high frequencies can be shelves if you want them to, which is super cool. So sometimes I might want to just boost everything below 200 hertz by a couple dB, maybe cut everything at 400 hertz a little bit, and then get a little boost in the top end over here. This is a great EQ for that. It's very intuitive. It sounds good. You can boost a lot in the highs without it getting super, super harsh. Let me show you what that sounds like on the mix here.
I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself. My homemade prison.
Go kind of smiley face curve on that sucker.
I built it up for myself. I built it up by myself.
So thickened up the low end a little bit. I kind of like that. Boosting the top end way up here was too much, but you could hear it was a lot of brightness, but it wasn't super tinny and harsh. Like, it had a way of making it even somewhat pleasant, even boosting it up quite a bit. And obviously we can change the different frequencies here and turn it into a shelf if we want to versus a bell-shaped curve. A lot of versatility here, and it just tends to sound pretty good. You can't get surgical, which is pretty typical of most kind of analog style EQs. If I want to get more surgical and take out a specific frequency like a notch filter, well, then I'll just reach for my normal stock EQ because it allows me to do that a lot more easily. This EQ, I spent a few minutes trying to figure it out, this Baxendall deal. I just didn't get it. And I didn't feel like going and reading a manual. I just moved on to something else. So if I can understand it pretty quickly, I tend to just move on. And then maybe one day when I'm just lazing around the studio and want to learn more, I will go research that. But that one did not connect with me. This one, pretty simple. Haven't used it. This one also looked fun. And I messed with it on a few different things. I think on drums, because it seems to have bass, mid, and high, which is the stuff I want to adjust on drums. But I just couldn't. Again, it was one of those, all right, this is the boost, there's no cut. This one has a boost, and you pick the frequency, but again, if it's not super intuitive, I just don't use it. So you may see that and say, oh my goodness, it says Solar 69. I know exactly what that is. I don't know what that is, and I just don't care. This one, again, kind of the same deal. I didn't even know what the hertz were. Low frequency in kilohertz. Does that mean that's 100 hertz? 1 kilohertz would be that. No, that's 1K. Like, this one did not seem terribly intuitive to me either. And I know, I told you at the beginning of this video, this is an idiot's guide to these plugins. I don't use a lot of these. It sounds like this one is a cut. These are for boosting, but I just don't know, and I couldn't figure it out quickly, and I moved on. This is another just stock kind of 4-band EQ. I'm guessing kind of like my ADL 700 that I have. And then this one, kind of the same deal. This one I've used a little bit. Kind of a 3-band EQ seems a little more intuitive, but even then I just didn't connect with it like I connect with this one, and a little bit with this one, and then definitely with this one. So out of the 16 or so new plugins that I got, I use this one a whole lot. I use this compressor a whole lot, this one a whole lot, and I've used this one quite a bit as well. So getting 4 out of 16, a fourth of the plugins are something that have worked their way into my regular mixing workflow right out of the gate. And the more I have it, the more I'll experiment. If I'm working on something and I'm thinking, I just need a different sound, I've got a few more available to me. But I'm not going to lose any sleep over I'm not using every single plugin here. Now, I know the argument will be, well, Joe, these were given to you, so you don't have any money tied into it. So, of course, you don't feel the obligation to use them all. But even that being said, I want to encourage you, if you get a plugin bundle like this, even if you only use 4 plugins like I'm using here, I still think that is worth the $400 or $500 you might spend to get this bundle, especially since they're available on the mixer as well. But I still think that's worth it. I would readily spend $100 on a great EQ or compressor plugin that sounds like something I want it to sound like. With this, you get to have those, and you'll probably find 4 or 5 that you love, and then a few others that you can begin to work into your workflow. But don't feel the pressure to have to use all of them all the time and to have to master all of them. Like for me, I picked the ones that I picked that I just showed you, and I've spent a ton of time with those, really getting to know them. Just like if I had a piece of gear in my rack that I wanted to get to know, I use it a bunch. Once I feel really comfortable with these, which I do, the next mix I do, I might come in here and say, all right, let's really figure out this Everest. Where does it really shine? Let's try it on a bunch of stuff on this mix. And maybe I'll pick one EQ. Like this Solar 69. Maybe I'll read up on it a little bit and then try to use it on my next mix. But I don't feel like I'm totally dropping the ball if I decide to not use it for a while. And that's the point I wanted to get across. Plugins are great, but how you use them is more important. And then even just finding a few that you love, that you know inside and out, that you can use over and over and over again. To me, that's more important than having a huge variety of plugins available to you. Sometimes the best skill you can have is to know when to not use stuff, when to not use any plugins, and when to only use a certain number of plugins, and to limit yourself so that you're staying with the music and not getting super sidetracked on the equipment itself. Okay, that's it. That's enough for me for today. If you like the way I approach mixing and you think you could learn a thing or two from me about mixing, then check out my 5-step mix guide. It takes you through my process of using these plugins or any software to get your mixes finished in a more timely manner and also to get them sounding better. And it's a system that pretty much guarantees that you will get better mixes if you continue working through that system over and over. So check that out at 5stepmix.com, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.